You're like an A+ student of patriarchy, right? So was I. Well, we all, all of the ones who survived the 90s.
You're listening to The Whisper Network. I am Emily Hampshire, and this episode will sound a little bit different. Katie, the person who forced me to do this podcast, has abandoned me. She is shooting right now on set in the UK, and I am here, terrified to be flying solo. But she will be back. She better be back. I mean, the only reason she wouldn't be back is because I murdered her for not coming back, so I've totally got this under control. Now, the good thing is, our guest today is someone I know and have wanted to get on this show from the beginning. We met, I'm not saying who it is yet, because, podcast hosts do that. They tease it, right? So me and upcoming guest met when we were teen actors in Toronto. She was and still is an actress that I am endlessly impressed by. I could watch her just read the phone book. She is so captivating on screen. But the reason I wanted to have her on the show is that anytime I've heard her speak, I am left empowered by this innate matriarchal vibe wisdom she has. And I'm just in awe of her ability to communicate it so well. So we reconnected on the gram a couple of years ago, but busy lives and time zones have made it so this is actually going to be the first time we are seeing each other live, face-to-face, in probably 20 years. Cat! You look exactly the same.
You do too.
Thank you. But I am actually supposed to do this intro of you. And what's really awkward about this is I have to do it in front of you.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'll dissociate.
Yeah. The good thing is that I know when I've been in that seat, it's as awkward for you as it is for me. So we're in same boat.
Yeah. I'll pretend it's someone else. It's a character.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Talk about the character of Caterina Scorsone.
Oh, yeah.
The character, not me.
This is the character of Emily being podcast host. Okay, here I go, okay?
You're doing great.
Okay. Caterina Scorsone is the definition of a multi-hyphenate legend. She is probably best known as Dr. Amelia Shepherd on the long-running TV medical drama Grey's Anatomy. She's not a doctor, but she is a certified doula, not to mention a mother of 3 and a certified badass who has been calling out bad behavior since she was a kid. Caterina, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
I tried to be chill, but I'm blushing and my heart is beating hard. That was confronting.
Right?
Though it was all complimentary, and that was I guess the Canadian.
The Canadian in us, it's very hard. I'd rather somebody make bad jokes about me or something that I could laugh along with. But
they'll find out I took a compliment.
Yeah. So what I feel is kind of great about this is I get to ask you all the questions that I've really wanted to ask you for so long in the guise of a podcast interview thing. Yeah. Because I've been fascinated by you from really young age because you did things that I'm looking back on now as holy shit, you became a certified doula when I had to look up the word doula. I didn't know what that was. So I would ask you for the people who maybe were like me, can you explain what a doula is?
Okay, yes. So, and first of all, I think one of the things is I think just my temperament is to learn by doing. And so I think I probably should have just looked up what a doula was.
Because you might not have done it.
But I was no, I need more detail. And so a doula is a person who accompanies a woman in the most powerful, transformative moment of her reproductive life, right? And basically provides whatever kind of comfort or accompaniment is needed while the woman does the work. The doula is not casting herself as a doctor who's rescuing this woman from her experience. The doula is there to ask the woman, what she needs right now while she performs this massively miraculous, transformative thing that brings a human being into the world. And you learn things like massage techniques and like ice chips would be helpful. But really, you're there to like hold the woman in her power.
Okay, so that's exactly, like, I was talking about you before, and it's just even that, the way you describe a woman giving birth, it's so empowering and all those things. And I mean, why I'm doing this podcast is because I'm so weirdly embarrassed of women's stuff, which is, like, I'm not embarrassed of like sex stuff, doing sex, but it's all like in my head, it's all been like from the male gaze in this weird way. But women's, like giving birth, like all of that stuff, I was, I guess, trained in a way to think it's like gross or all that.
Yeah, it's totally by design. It is by design. You actually are a fantastic student. You're like an A+ student of patriarchy, right? So was I. Well, we all, all of the ones who like, survived the 90s.
Yeah. But I feel like even when you were younger, I remember that I just found you, but maybe I'm wrong about this. I have very weird, I'm not sure about my memories from then. But I do remember. Yeah.
Thank God we didn't have social.
Right? Yeah. But I remember you being, well, like this. Like, but you have sisters, right?
I'm one of 5 kids, and 4 of us were sisters. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did it a big thing or?
In terms of women's stuff, I mean, I think I came from just a really curious family. My parents were they both have PhDs. They're like intellectuals in various ways, but they're also both very into social justice. They just raised us to be very like curious, and whenever something bumped, to be like, well, what's that about? To really ask the questions. And I think when we were like 15, right? When we were like auditioning in Toronto, and like, first of all, and you were like the most gorgeous, talented. I have to like take my moment to introduce you from my perspective, which was I was mesmerized by how like poised and beautiful and prepared and skillful you were. I remember like auditions that I had gone out for and then you booked, and then watching your performance and being like, wow, I would cast her in that. You were so detailed in your preparation, and I don't know, you just had a respect for the work that was so admirable.
I don't even know how to express what you just said does to me, because I would never have thought that, first of all, because I think we were also in a time where I look back now and other actresses were competition. There wasn't, because there wasn't any like, wasn't any good parts. I was like the girlfriend for so many.
Well, and you're right. It was always like 8 guys in a film and then there's 1 girl.
Yeah.
So it was actually a zero-sum game.
Totally.
Again, by design. And we weren't even the focal character with the interior life. We were the indicator that the guy was so successful that he could pull this chick, right? We were indicating his prowess.
Yeah.
But we weren't given a lot of room to have all of the dimensionality of a whole human being.
Yeah. You know what's really weird about that is I actually only started to get good parts when I put on weight, when I got
Oh, fuck yeah.
which is, this is a terrible thing to say, but it's like, I also was like, I have to be funny. Which is, I say that now and I'm like, that is horrible. I would never want somebody, but like, that was my thinking back then.
Wow.
But anyways, like, to hear you say that though is so, because I looked at you in not the exact same way, just in this way of like, to me, you were already like Sarah Polly level, right? Like you were already, you'd been on Mr. Dress Up.
I've been
like,
on Mr. Dress Up. That's pretty cool.
And a series and all these things. And so I was just like in awe of you. I was always beneath you in my head.
Oh no, not to me at all. But again, we were trained to see it as like a vertical hierarchy.
Yeah.
Which again is not just with us, like our whole society was organized in such a way, and it still is, in such a way that we're supposed to view it as a vertical hierarchy where there's better than and there's worse than, and you're somewhere in that spectrum rather than a horizontal plane where everybody has their uniqueness and there's room for all of us, and we just have to kind of find the most appropriate fit for everyone, and we don't have a dearth of resources. Like, there's enough.
Yeah. It's so weird how my thinking has changed about that, not just because I do think things have changed so much since we were, like, even since
thank God.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Just the sets, the way, everything changed after Me Too.
Like, what was an intimacy coordinator? We didn't have any of that.
No.
Like, we didn't even know.
Yeah, and I think of things now that are like inappropriate that then it was just like that was normal. Like you had to be drivers asking you out, and you had to be like, oh, you had to make up an excuse and make people not hate you.
Well, and I think women are constantly accused of like people pleasing or like fawning or adding too many exclamation marks. Like there are all of these kind of funny ways to talk about how silly we are, but actually what we're talking about is how we adapted to avoid violence. And there's like the starkness of like the violence of like an actual assault, but then there's also the like psychological violence and the emotional violence and the financial violence of maybe not getting the part or losing the job because you couldn't roll with it, right? And so you're constantly threatened with structural violence if you don't find a workaround that's not going to threaten the masculinity, i.e. the like dominance of whatever man is in the room.
Fuck, you can articulate shit so well. And that is it. Have you seen, and like I've totally gone off the rails of this.
That's fine, I know.
Sheet that says like a Q line, and I will get to it. But now I'm just, have you seen Anna Kendrick's movie, Woman of the Hour?
I have not, but I want to, yeah.
Okay, so I watched it and like I'm a fan of Anna Kendrick as an actress, and I was curious to see her directorial debut, and it is, in my opinion, all about that. Like every single frame of that movie is a woman having to be faced with violence and how she adapts to it and all these kind of ways of coping. And a lot of it for me, and I think a lot of women, has always been like making things a joke, making it funny. Like I remember directors that we knew at film festival, that like if I look back at what I laughed about that they did now, like
I know. What's funny, if you kind of think about the humor of that time, so much of it was sexual, first of all. I think the root of the humor of that time was like making women uncomfortable and then seeing if they would laugh at their own discomfort. Like if they would be like, that's so funny how you just like made me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I can laugh at like, oh, you're being bad.
And I'm not going to call you on it though. And I'm not going to, and because if a woman did call them on it, I would see what would happen to that woman. They'd be done.
And the thing is, and where the unconscious conditioning, it's been happening since we were babies, right? Like as soon as we got labeled girl, labeled boy, they assigned us a color. And they assigned us a series of traits. And they assigned us traits actually that were associated with violence or a lack of violence, right? So men are now they're going to be dominant and they're going to be powerful and they're going to, chop wood and they're going to, and women, the definition of femininity was associated with like how gentle they are, essentially how much they are willing to absorb violence, right? And like diffuse violence and use their own energy and their own body to do the emotional labor of like, healing the violence that a man holds in his heart because of his lack of childhood care. You know what I mean? I heard someone recently say, it was something on Instagram, and it was this woman who was saying that they were in gender studies and they had a professor, I think, who was explaining that like, if gender is a binary and there's men and there's women, and you need to now understand what that assignation means, boys are conditioned to know that they're boys because they're not girls. And so they are conditioned to know that they have succeeded in boyness because they're not weak, they're not soft, they're not absorbent of emotion, they don't cry, right? And so because their self-definition is rooted in how much they are not like women, they have to, in some unconscious way, hate and reject women and feel violent about them because we represent all of the parts of them that have been intentionally rejected, right? And so they both like desire us because we restore to them the pieces that they're not allowed to have. But they also are angry that we get to have it. And so there's this like very ambivalent feeling of like, I want it, I hate it. I want it, I hate it. That is going to result in violent patriarchy, which we're now seeing with all of the
Which actually I think is a huge thing about trans women, that there was all this stuff about trans women in bathrooms, and there's never been any kind of, if anything, they're more afraid. A friend of mine said to me, she's like, it's the patriarchy because it's that anyone would want to be a woman, to be that like weak and like the lowest of the low makes them hate it.
Well, and it challenges the whole structure where we've placed maleness at the top. If somebody wouldn't want to be that, then it maybe challenges the idea that it's the best thing to be. So first of all, get the fuck rid of that. But also, I think that what we've also revealed accidentally is that we're not afraid of trans women in the bathrooms.
No.
We're afraid of our cis male husbands.
Yeah.
We're afraid of our cis male friends because we know that identifying with cis maleness is in part identifying as someone who would perpetrate violence against someone given the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Trans women are identifying as women with women.
Yeah.
Like, did you ever feel unsafe around a trans woman ever? How many men, cis, heterosexual men in the 90s did you feel unsafe around? Like many, many, many. And then it was just a question of like, what's your strategy? Is your strategy going to be...
Yeah, I don't even know if I felt unsafe. I felt like this was normal. Everything was normal about like
No, I felt
having
skillful.
Yeah.
I felt safe because I felt so skillful at navigating the either overt or implied violence, right?
Yeah.
I was like, I know how to tango here. Like, I know how to make sure that I can get what I need and get out of this situation without losing what I need. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Something that I am just so in awe of that you did this at the time. And I don't think I even knew this, but like a few years ago when the Me Too movement was in full swing, there was a group of actors who spoke out about a certain director, and you immediately jumped in to support them with receipts. Because back in 1999, you published an essay in our union's magazine about your own bad experiences with this director. And to think that you did that then is mind-blowing to me. And I want to know, what made you feel brave enough to do that, or like you could do that? Because I couldn't have. I couldn't even like spell, so there was that.
Well, I mean, I think it was a combination of things. First of all, the Me Too movement started, and I remember when it first started, I was kind of just watching. And I was like, what is going to happen? What's happening here? What are we talking about? And then it was actually Rachel McAdams and Selma Blair that came out and talked about this director. And they kind of named him as someone who had inappropriately propositioned them in the audition process in Toronto.
Yeah.
And
I have goosebumps right now because I'm thinking back. Now it's all like in Toronto, at TIFF, all these things that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so they named him. And then Rolling Stone came out with an article. I forget if he wrote it or if he was interviewed, where he basically, and I hadn't said anything yet. I hadn't said anything. I don't know why I'm even qualifying that, but I hadn't said anything yet publicly. And he came out in this article in Rolling Stone basically saying that these actresses were insane and they were just trying to get attention and like all of the normal things that they accuse women of when they speak the truth. And so it was at that point that I was like, okay, now he's not only did he commit violence against my colleagues.
Your language is amazing because that is a difference. And it's a difference in
Yeah.
the way we talk about things. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't change their identity. It changes him. He committed violence. He is a violent perpetrator, and he committed violence against my colleagues in my industry. And now they're telling the truth about it. And he's now slandering them in a way that is going to have financial repercussions for them and professional repercussions in all kinds of ways, and let alone psychological and emotional repercussions. And so at that point, because I had receipts, I was like, okay, this is a place where I can be useful. And so I republished I posted the cover article for the SAG Union magazine about sexual harassment. And it had been 1999. And I'd been to an audition with a casting director that we know very well. And this director had asked me to meet him to talk about the script. But it came through the casting director. So I was like, oh, this is legit. And as you know, at the time, we were all like, we were doing like method-y things. And we were like,
oh my God, yeah.
The more
we were like, not legit it was, the more actually you felt like you were really doing what you were supposed to do.
Yeah. But this was even like co-signed on by the casting director.
Yeah.
And I remember the director called me. I'm not even calling him the director. The Predator called me. And interestingly, I had gone into this audition. I was 19 years old, and I had gone into this audition in character. My friend Ben Foster had been like, you should go in character. And he was shooting a movie in Toronto at the time at the Sutton Place. And that was where the Predator was staying, and he wanted me to like meet him there. And I was like, okay, I'm going to meet you, but we're going to meet in the restaurant downstairs. And he suddenly got very serious, and he was like, why would you say that? And I was like, weird. And so the character I had gone into the audition playing was this like kind of tweaked out like college student who was like cooking meth in a lab. So I had gone in like a little like tweaky and like seemingly less grounded than the person
like
that I am.
Vulnerable. And
vulnerable. Look, intentionally seeming vulnerable.
Yeah, because
and so I'm sure that had
character is vulnerable, but yeah, okay.
Yes, exactly. And so I think that must have been part of the like algorithm of like, I think I'm going to try this one. So I went to meet him at the restaurant and essentially spent like, again, I should have gotten up right away, but we were trying to like, make our way in the industry.
Yeah.
And I had asked Ben, I said, hey, I feel a little weird about this director. Would you come down to the bar and sit at the bar?
Wow.
And he did. He came down and he sat at the bar and like nursed a whiskey while I sat with this director at the table and essentially like negotiated for an hour. I sat down and he was like, why did you make that joke about like, and I was like, well, because,
a lot of truth
but again,
in
I'm like on the back foot. And then he was like, basically he was like it was actually like an overt, you can have this part if we have sex. Like it was an actual quid pro quo. And I was like,
wow.
So I think you should give me the part without the sex.
Actually, the way you just said that is totally how you would have said it then. Like, you know, that's exactly how the cat I knew would have said it, which is funny and
jokey. Like, haha, we're going to pretend that you're not doing this.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you off the hook of this, like, predatory potential sexual assault by making it, I'm going to help you make this a joke.
Yeah. It's amazing to me that it was that overt because in my experience—
it's more subtle.
Yeah. And it's like, I find that harder because then it's my fault. It's completely my fault because they didn't do anything.
Yeah. They just kind of suggested that maybe. But he actually said, and this was so funny because later we found out there was like a whole investigation of him in Spy magazine. But he actually said during this negotiation, he said things like, as I was like, I think you would benefit from having me in your film and then it will do better because I'm a great actor. And so I know you want to have sex, but
my acting's
I
better.
really think we'll both benefit if you give me this part without the sex. And I'm 19.
Oh my God, I can't believe how old he was too.
It's so gross. And so he said to me, see, you are thinking like a director right now. and I need you to think like an actor. And as your director, I need to know that I could get you to do things that you wouldn't normally do.
Oh my God.
So like that coercively, like if you were
Also,
a
he
real
said
actor,
these kind of, like, he knows what he's saying. He's done this many times before.
100%.
Yeah,
A friend
yeah,
of mine who was in the industry, I told him about this. Well, and we didn't go upstairs, by the way. We did not go upstairs. But I told my friend about what had happened, and he sent me this article by Spy Magazine. It was like a chart of like 14 women that he'd said all these very same things to in this magazine. Like it was all there. And yet our industry was continuing to fund him and fund his projects, and he was still represented. He was not dropped by his agency. Like, we knew that this was happening. And so this is 1999. I wrote that article. I told my representation what had happened.
What did they say?
Well, sorry, I told them first. And they were like, oh, I'm so sorry that that happened. It's really shitty that that happened. I'm so sorry that happened. But at least he wanted to fuck you. I mean, that's kind of a good sign, just career-wise. Like, it means that, like, you're very attractive. People want to,
You're really likable.
hire you.
You're so likable.
You're so charming, hot. That's good long term, just saying.
That is what auditions and meetings felt like, though, that you had to be somebody who they would want to be.
Yes.
Because
that was your value, is what they were communicating, right? And so, like, even if it wasn't actually sex, that you had to communicate to the audience, like your value to the audience was that.
Yes, yeah, and we were told that constantly.
Constantly.
I can't believe your rep said that, but I absolutely fucking can.
Of course you can. Well, and then they posted in like and we don't think you should say anything about it, because I was like, we should tell someone. We have to tell the union. We have to, and they were like, you shouldn't say anything about it because we want to protect you. Mm-hmm. We think you are so talented and you have so much promise, and we don't want you to ruin your career. So we are going to protect you by not telling anyone that this happened.
But you know what's really sad? That at that time, it very easily could have been you say something and your career is over, nobody wants to work with you.
Babe, it was. I wrote that article being like, guys, we need to warn actors that this can happen. We need to talk about sexual harassment in the workplace. I'm 19 years old. We need to talk about it. I talked to my reps. Nobody supported me in like consequences for this person. And
did they tell the casting director? She must have read that article.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
And then I was dropped by my agency.
Wait, I didn't know
I was like ghosted.
Wait a second.
By my American agency. Yeah. So
wow.
that was that. So you were going to ask me, that's when I went back to college. I had been offered a scholarship to Trinity College at U of T, and I was kind of debating whether I would take the scholarship or move to LA at that time. And after that happened, I was like, I'm gonna take that scholarship.
You know what's so crazy? I thought that you said like you didn't want to act anymore. I thought because you were smarter than everybody, and I'm like, she's really smart. She's going to university, and then I remember you did like this whole yoga thing, and that's why I was in awe of the doula stuff. I'm like, she's doing all these things, and like acting is like. I have this actor shame, but I really thought this kind of like breaks my fucking heart that I was like, you're like Claire Danes. You're going to university instead of like you're choosing.
I mean, I guess I could have continued like in Toronto. It wasn't as black and white as that. It was like I was being ghosted by the agency that I was at, but I could have gone and found another agency. But I think it was just I was like existentially tired of like fending off predators, in order to do my craft. And so when this happened, I think it was, and maybe it was a little avoidant, maybe it was a little premature, but I was like, if me being authentic and not allowing myself to be predated is going to result in me being professionally punished, fuck you guys. I'm going to go somewhere where I am appreciated and thrive there. I just didn't want to be in a codependent relationship with our industry when I understood at that point that even the people who had the power were not philosophically, it wasn't just this guy. It was like the people who had the power were like, shh.
Yeah.
So philosophically, they were not wanting to stop predation from happening. And this was 1999, which was a long time before Me Too. So people did know what was happening.
After the break, more with Caterina Scorsone. I remember so clearly that I had a general meeting before Me Too, and I had one kind of a week after. The general meeting before Me Too was like every other general I've ever been on with a man, and it was like I was on a first date. And what I kind of admire about you is that thing of like, it's not right. It's them. And I, at the time, and still do, this thing of like, well, it's me, though. It's me doing it, and I'm the one who I want them to like me because I want to get the part. But I remember that being, we went out after. And it's so mixed up with like, did I want to date this person? Did I not?
Right.
Not really. I wanted... Yeah.
Well, and I want to qualify. I want to definitely like deflate your image of me. You know, this was such an extreme situation. It was a quid pro quo.
Yeah.
Right? And so walking into that office and being like, this happened. There's no ambiguity. There wasn't like, hey, I think you're really pretty. Do you want to have a glass of wine? It was a quid pro quo. So the clarity was so stark that I was able to see what happens when that clarity is there. And I was able to see people go, oh, I see the clarity. And also, we're willing to have you exploited for our profits.
Yeah.
But I've been in many situations where I think, again, okay, I'm going to say something controversial, which is that as long as we are existing in a patriarchy where we as women, as queer people, as people of color, where we do not have access to the levers of power to the same degree that cis-het white men do, as long as we're existing in a patriarchy, it is very hard to figure out where consent begins and ends. Because they slut-shame actresses and associate actresses with prostitution, right? Mm-hmm. And you win Oscars for playing a prostitute, and you win Oscars for getting sexually assaulted, right? But in part, that association is because there's money tied to your role as the feminine, the archetypal feminine, right? So as an actress, we are embodying the archetype of the feminine in the film. But we are getting paid for it. So we are called prostitutes. Wives who don't have access to jobs in the same way, who couldn't get a business loan until the 70s, who couldn't get a bank account or a credit card, were associated with like virtue and being emotionally absorbent and nonviolence. But essentially, the only way for them to survive in a world was to be chatteled, basically paired up with a man who had resources, or else violence would come to her, right? Financial violence and a reputational violence, like in a social violence, right? And so marriage without the levers of power in your hands, without your own bank account, without financial autonomy, is sex work. Right? If you are not able to be autonomous without this person funding your life, then you are trading your receptivity and your fertility and your mechanisms of pleasure. You're trading it for security in this patriarchy. And so, yeah, we take the hit as actresses, but like all of the women operating within heteropatriarchy who don't have full financial autonomy and equality are negotiating with sex work.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? I would always kind of back then and up until very recently align myself with a guy in power to be able to get my ideas out there. I would make them think it was theirs. So I could, do it in a show. Like I could have my part do something, whatever. And then I mostly aligned myself with gay men in power because I didn't have to trade on
we don't have to have sex.
I don't have to, do any of that. And we can work together. But I never thought that I could stand on my own because no one would take me seriously. I'm an actress. I'm just especially like not even a woman, an actress. Like to me, that was... And when you equate it, it has always felt like prostitution to me in that
and
way.
it's the height of femininity, right? It's the prettiness and it's the femininity and it's the, she loves, just all of the associations are so misogynistic and they're just like an exaggeration of actually the kind of woman that they are kind of looking for as their arm candy.
So you have 3 kids. Have any of them, been interested in acting at all and getting into the industry?
Yeah, one of them is very interested in storytelling in a lot of ways. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about this generation, as distinct from our generation, is that they are interested in writing and directing and all of the things that, I don't know if you remember this, but like we'd be on set and the director would come over and like show the teenage guys the light meter.
Oh, yeah.
And not show us the light meter.
Yeah.
Like, there was no assumption that we were going to go into filmmaking.
Yeah.
But there was an assumption that these young men should be mentored because they would be the future filmmakers, right?
Yeah.
And so my kids are growing up knowing that whatever their gender expression is, they can be the storyteller. They can be the center of the story. And I think let them, it's going to be their decision ultimately.
Yeah, but
be in the industry, but I would educate them. I would make sure that they understood their finances. I think the first piece of the education is making sure that I have like teen workbooks where they're learning about like a checking account. When my eldest was 8 years old, we went to the bank and started a bank account. And
oh my God.
I want them to feel fully financially autonomous so that they have the power of exit in any negotiation.
Oh my God. I remember so well when I got my first big part and I got money. I didn't know you had to pay taxes. I didn't know about taxes. And then the next year, I got this huge tax bill, which I could not pay. And so my agent took me to this money manager guy. And he was this older guy. He was like a grandpa guy. But the way my voice changed every time I went and spoke to him, because he put me on an allowance that I had to ask him for my money to help me pay off this thing. But it was my money. But my voice would become a baby.
Childlike.
And just be like, oh. And I'd always want to have good news for him. Like, I'm close to this part. I might be getting it. I'm close to it. So if I could just have, please.
But literally, you're his boss. You're his boss.
But that is so important. And to this day, I feel like I have this thing with money that I feel like is bad to be ambitious, bad to want it, bad to have it. When I have it, I feel like nobody can have less than me. I have to have less than other. Like it's.
Yeah. But can I draw a parallel here for the purpose of this podcast, which is like a lot of those feelings are the same feelings you have about your pussy. Right? Intentionally, they have created a situation where in order for us to have a relationship with our own power, i.e. our power of pleasure, our power of fertility, our power of, creativity, we need a middleman, right? So you're not allowed to enjoy your pussy. You're not allowed to enjoy your money or be in charge of your money. You need a man to come and tell you that your pussy is beautiful or that this is how it should feel pleasure. You need a middleman. You need a grandpa guy to give you your own money, right? And so they've intentionally created a separation between ourselves and actually everything we need. and everything we already have, right? And so now we're negotiating with men, and we're negotiating with patriarchy, and we're negotiating with capitalism to get back the thing that we were alienated from by them that already belonged to us. We don't need them in this equation.
Yeah.
And pussies are political. I think in these times, I think one of the ways that when we're feeling so like powerless, you know, and we don't know how to affect what's going on politically in the world and economically in the world, like an act of resistance is loving your pussy. Like,
okay, go further into this.
An act of resistance is loving your pussy. I read this fantastic book at one point, I think like 10 years ago, called, or maybe less, called Pussy, a Reclamation. She was talking about how the hatred for the actual organ of the pussy is about creating a symbolism for women, right? And so when you start loving your pussy, you start loving yourself, right? It's the seat of your pleasure. It's the seat of your creativity. If you have an antagonistic relationship with it or a shameful relationship with it, how are you going to love the rest of yourself, right? And so I remember, and I thought this when I heard about your podcast and when I listened to your kind of hang up about the woman stuff.
Yeah. Okay. We have been talking so long. We've been told we have to stop.
We have to wrap it up. You should probably come over.
Yeah. Because I have other questions.
I have so many questions for you. I feel like this was a podcast where you were interviewing me, but I want to ask you about everything that's happened in the last.
About my pussy?
Well,
it's
sure.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, I want to see it.
Thank you so much for coming on and being here.
Thank you for having me. Come over.
I'm going to come over. Okay, bye. You're listening to The Whisper Network. We'll be back after the break. So much of Cat just leaves me in awe and speechless at the way she speaks and the way she speaks about being a woman. And it's the polar opposite of how I was raised and how, or even like I'm always not on my side. And she is always this empowering force. She's so smart. It's kind of awkward doing these reflections without Katie here because I'm just talking to my producer who's not on mic. Shouldn't be so shy, Allison. Anyway, Allison just asked me what that conversation with Kat brought up for me, like memories from that time of my life. Like, honestly, when she said how she saw me, like what her point of view was on me as an actor and talked about how like well prepared I was and all those things, it just reminded me of, well, like I left home at 16 to be an actor and everything was about that. And I literally would stay up all night in Fran's diner because it was 24 hours and like just work at learning how to be the greatest actor of all time. And because I didn't go to acting school and I didn't even go to past high school, I felt like I had to work harder. And so it was surprising that anyone saw that, like that's what she pointed out of how prepared I was, because I still feel that way, like that I have to work harder because you can't rely on like, I don't know, talent or whatever. And it's so interesting because I always thought I was less than her. She seemed more successful than me. And it wasn't even like she was commenting on putting it in any hierarchy. I felt seen. I guess that's what it is. I felt seen, and I had not only forgotten what it was like back then, but I didn't think I was seen by anybody. So that is our episode for today. I am so grateful to Kat, not only for coming on the show, but like, even if this wasn't recorded, I feel like, well, kind of the same way I felt whenever we've had such an amazing guest. I feel like they changed my life. And I guess I am grateful that I'm doing this show alone, Katie. Anyways, as always, we want to hear from you. What are you whispering about? What do you want to hear us whisper about next? Send us an email or leave a voice note at our website, thewhispernetworkpodcast.com. And don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite podcasting app. I am Emily Hampshire, and I will see you next time with Katie Boland. And now I'm going to read the credits. Okay. The Whisper Network is produced by Antica Productions. Our senior producer is Allison Broverman. Thank God we have her because she had to pop in because I would have talked for like 7 years. Samantha McLean is our development producer. Laura Roguer is our executive producer. And Sydney Fior is our production manager. This episode was sound designed by Philip Wilson with theme music by Michael Boland and Nathaniel Smith. This podcast is hosted on Acast. That's what happens, Katie, when you leave me alone. Katie, come back!